Hello, my name is Colleen Getty with The Room to Write, and we are here doing another episode of the Journey of a Story series. And today we have the wonderful Gail Lowe, and she is going to tell us about her books and her newspaper experience. But the most important thing we're going to ask her is, how do you write, Gail? Maybe sort of just tell us what a regular writing session might look for you.
Oh, Colleen, it's never the same. Never the same. And I'll give you an example. A month ago, I was minding my own business when all of a sudden I got a little ping, a moment of clarity in my brain. And the name Camille popped in. And I said, what about Camille and who is she? So soon I found out who Camille was. She was going to be the character in my next story, my next book. So I don't have a title for it. I just know that this woman is the lead character in my next novel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the characters just show up and say it's time to write?
Yes, except for this one. This is my latest novel, Colleen, and it's called The Widower's Offering. And it's a story of a man named Otis Kingston. And he lives way up in the wilds of Maine. And he's really down, way down in the dumps. And the poor man doesn't know how he's going to pay the bills on top of his kitchen table. They're 6 inches high. He lost his job at the local paper mill, and he also lost his wife to cancer. But then one day, things begin to change for Otis when he goes on a walk and finds something lying in a ditch, something he never would have imagined. So the book was born with Otis Kingston in mind.
So is Otis Kingston your fictional character or based on a
Otis Kingston
real
is
person?
this man and his adopted Labrador retriever, Sadie. And part of the impetus for writing this book was a question I asked myself. What would I do, Colleen, if I came across a bag of money, a big bag?
And so did this come to you just like Camille? Like, was this just bing, one day this whole idea spilled out to you? Or how did that
No, this one was different.
start?
This was more contemplative. I contemplated for a long while, Gail, what would you do if you found money? What would you do? And I thought about it deeply. And that's when Otis was born. Because he comes upon money, found money.
Okay.
And he, at first, does not know what he's going to do with it.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second. So we're going to backtrack to you're contemplating, you somehow get this idea of what if I found money? This storyline starts to reveal itself. What does that look like in your writing routine? So like, do you spend a certain amount of time in contemplative thought? You know, is that part of any routine, or did that just happen to happen? And then at what point do you say, I'm going to start writing this down? And do you write it down? Do you type it? Are you speaking into something? Like, what's the whole creative process for you?
Well, my whole creative process for this book was to let the idea simmer in the back of my brain.
So no writing.
No writing for a little while, until I started to have seeds start to germinate about this man. And I got to know him through thinking about who he is as a person. And it turns out that Otis is a very, very generous man. And he also finds out some what I would call interesting and somewhat revolting information about what he finds.
Okay.
So,
And when does this
After
start to go
fashion-
down on the paper?
well, after fashion, I know that it's time to write the first sentence.
Okay.
In this particular case, the first sentence was written in this copy of the daily item of Wakefield, the Wakefield daily item, and it was during the pandemic. In 2020, when the pandemic really took hold, I called Bob Burgess, editor of the Wakefield Daily Item, and I said, Bob, what do you think about my publishing a novel for the next year? Serialize it. I will have 52 chapters waiting for you.
Okay, I have to ask you. So first of all, did you happen to write 52 chapters, or was this helping you to structure the story, as to think of it as a serialization?
Well, first of all, by then I had written the novel.
Okay, so it was done.
It was done, but I had to polish it. So each week, as I was writing the story, before I would send it to Bob Burgess, I would edit it and polish it up before he could publish it. And that was my process. Now, as far as where do I write?
Right.
My husband and I have a TV room on the second floor of our home. And I have a love seat. And I get onto that love seat, put a pillow behind me, open up my laptop, and I begin to write.
Okay. And do you outline? Are you just by the seat of your pants, or how does that?
No. Once I read this story, wrote this first sentence, and I'll read it to you. It took off from there.
Okay.
It just took off from
so it's
there.
the first sentence is sort of your
Yeah,
starting gun.
that's right.
Okay.
It's the nut of the story. So it says here, the letter delivered in a white number 10 envelope, return address, Church of the Blinding Light, 139 Trinity Street, Hopewell, Maine, sits on top of a 6-inch stack of mail on the kitchen table in Otis Kingston's 5-room bungalow. So from that point on, I had to ask myself a lot of questions. Who was the letter from? What did it say? And why didn't Otis open it immediately?
I love that. It's almost like you let all these ideas percolate in your mind, and then you sort of almost generate your own writing prompt, which ends up being your very first sentence that has sort of just all these details that can be pulled apart by you as you start your writing. That's a really interesting way of doing it, I think. I mean, it does put a lot of pressure on that first sentence. So how hard is it to write that first sentence? And do you not go on until you have that first sentence?
Yeah. Well, my work in the various newsrooms around the North Shore, I'm currently with the Wakefield Daily Item and have been with them for 17 years. Prior to that, I was with the Salem Evening News and the Daily Item of Lynn and various others. But I learned from my newsroom experience to always ask the questions, who, what, where, when, and why, and how. And that's how I wrote, answering the questions as I wrote. Plus, the lead character, Otis Kingston, here he is, took on a life of his own once I started to write about him.
Right.
My subconscious wrote the story. I didn't even have to think about it. And I would be surprised. Where did that idea come from? That's what I'd ask myself. It didn't matter.
Right.
It didn't matter because the story kept writing itself.
sounds like you're good at getting out of the way of your writing, which
I
is a
do.
problem for some
I-
people.
I get out of the way of my writing and I let the characters do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And in the case of Otis, well, he has very good principles, a strong moral compass. So when he comes upon this money in a ditch, he can't figure out what he's going to do with it until he really thinks about it. And then he does something magical.
Ah.
Yes, he does.
And so back to your, so as you stated, you work in a newsroom, so that probably helps you get out of the way of your writing, because in a newsroom you don't have a lot of time to fiddle around coming up with ideas. You got to get it on paper. But I am fascinated with the idea of serializing a novel. I think that is, I love that idea, and I've always loved that idea. It used to happen all the time back in the day. So walk us through, you started telling us you're asking Bob Burgess if he'd be up for this. Maybe give us an insight into, was there any back and forth? Was it like, yes, let's do this? Are there constraints in terms of, like, did you have to make sure each chapter was a certain amount of words? Or so what were sort of the nuts and bolts and the unfun parts of, like, actually making that happen?
Well, in early July that year, in 2020, I think it was 2020, yeah. As I said, the pandemic was in full swing, and people were not getting out like they were. So I went to him and I said to Bob, I have a novel written. I think people in Wakefield and beyond would like to read it. Would you like to publish it serial style? And he didn't even hesitate. He said, let's go for it.
Nice.
Bob is great with me. He trusts my judgment, and anything I pitch to him for a story, he'll jump right on it.
That's awesome.
He has never said no to me.
And so was it, but it has to be this many words, et cetera, or what was the formatting?
Well, the formatting is that, you know, when you're in newspapering, you budget so many words or so many column inches for a piece of work. So I kept my column inches to about 20 or 25.
And what does that mean?
It
Column
means-
inch, like, I don't know what that means.
It means that column inches is another way to measure how many words can fit into any particular story.
Okay. So how can somebody at home figure that out? Like, how were you able to figure out how
all
many
right.
column inches was the length?
Okay, here's what you do. If you've written a chapter, you find out what the word count is by using your tools up at the top of your screen. And if you've written 1,800 words, then you divide 1,800 by 38.
Okay.
And that will give you the column inches.
Interesting. Why
Isn't-
38? What's 38 mean?
38, I'm not sure. It's just a measurement tool.
Ah.
And your word count, let's say, again, it was 1,800. So you just use that 38 and divide that into the 1,800, and you've got your column inches.
Okay. So you would take a chapter, and you knew, obviously, you already knew maybe what the real estate you'd get in the paper, so you knew to keep it to 20 column
Yes.
inches.
Yes.
And so did you go through each chapter and actually do that equation and,
Yes.
and edit accordingly?
I
That's
think
awesome.
actually my column inch might have been around 20.
Okay.
So I would write, just for the sake of an argument, I would write maybe 2,000 words and cut it off there, making sure that that chapter ending made sense,
Right.
so that it would also whet the appetite for the reader. Well, what's going to happen next?
Right. And I'm guessing that's a big part of serializing something, because they
Yes.
have to wait a whole week. So you want them tuning in, and you need to somehow magically get the right words,
Yeah.
get the story moving forward, and leave them wanting the next week.
Right.
Wow.
Now, something interesting happens in newspapering. It is hoped that when Monday comes around, Bob Burgess will have space for the next chapter. But that didn't always happen. Sometimes there wasn't any space for the book to be published.
Right.
And there was a phenomenon around that. He would get calls from readers who were saying, "What happened to my chapter? Why didn't you publish this chapter today?"
That's awesome.
They were hungry for it.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's part of the beauty of putting something out there and then finding out that people are loving it.
Right. And so one of the staff members, George at WCAT here, he had asked about how it is for the writer, because this is different from the full packages out there, and they get the full spectrum of your work, and then people love it, they don't like it, or everything in between. On a weekly thing, are you getting feedback? What kind of feedback were you getting from readers as this progressed, and did it change the more chapters that were out there?
Here's what happened as people got into the book more and more. Let's say I had 52 chapters. I broke it down into 52, so it would be a complete year.
Yeah, that was still, I'm boggled by that too.
Yeah, and I was able to do that. And as the people got more into the book, they were calling the newsroom again. "Where can we buy the book?"
They just wanted to finish it already.
Yeah, they wanted a copy that they could hold in their hands. Where can we get the book? Is it in the library? Is it in the bookstores? No, it was sitting in my computer.
That's funny.
And that's when I thought, I wonder if I could get this published. And I have a business outside of what I do at the Wakefield Daily Item. I have a boutique company called Word Power.
Okay.
And I handle advertising and other services, marketing for them, and I also edit books. So one of my clients in Gloucester said to me, "Gail, I've read this book, the chapters you sent me, and this needs to be in print. I'll help you do it."
Wow.
So my client, who was a very nice man in Gloucester, he walked me through the entire process of getting the book on Amazon. And in order to do that, you need specific kind of software.
Okay.
His software is called Atticus. And Atticus is the software you use to upload your book into the manuscript.
Okay. And what
These-
does that mean? Like, it sets it up visually for printing, or? Oh, okay.
Yep. And then you can tweak it. For example, in the publishing world, let me show you. In the publishing world, there is something called a dropped cap.
Oh, okay.
Here it is, right here.
So you don't have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Ah.
And he was able to do that for me. Each chapter has its own drop cap. Then we came on to chapter 2. In all the chapters, the headings are the same. The bottom is cut off the same. It's a nice, what I would call a
Justified.
a justified edge over here and over here.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's
It looks
nothing
great
messy about
visually.
it.
Yeah.
Being the first run off press, I went through it and I found a couple of typos. But the next time it runs, I will have caught those and fixed them.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
can go back in and change things still. Okay.
I can do that.
And how did you get your cover done?
I have a business partner through Word Power.
Okay.
Her name is Ellen Bogdan Olson. She is an artist and lives in New Hampshire. And Ellen Bogdan Olson did the cover for me. It's an original painting.
Oh, wow.
And she included elements of the story. She included, of course, Otis, the dog that he adopts, and you can see that he's on some sort of a hiking trail. Well, where do you think that might be?
Oh, it looks like a vineyard.
No, it's not a vineyard. It's actually the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, okay.
And did you know that along the Appalachian Trail, Colleen, many, many impoverished people live there?
Okay.
They have nothing.
Down in Virginia?
Some live in tin shacks. They just don't have anything.
Yeah.
They're so poor.
So Appalachia, because the Appalachian Trail goes right all the way from
It
New
starts
Hampshire
in
down.
Mount,
Is it New Hampshire?
Cata,
I don't know. I'm not good with my geography. I should be better.
well, Katahdin, I think it's called.
Okay.
Mount Katahdin in Maine, way
Oh,
up
in Maine.
Maine.
Okay.
And then it comes down to Rangeley Lakes in Maine, and it comes down through Massachusetts, the western part.
So did you have to do some research to weave
Oh,
that into the story?
I was researching and researching and researching. Yeah.
And that's is that a fun part for
Oh
you?
my
or?
goodness, I love that.
Okay.
Because I looked at the map of the Appalachian Trail, and I saw that Palmerton, spelled Palmerton,
Okay.
Pennsylvania, is quite an interesting place. It used to be used, part of the city area was used for a zinc mining company. And they took a lot of the sledge from the zinc and made it into a great big cinder bank, 2 miles long, way high, with heavy metals in it.
So is all your research, did you go there, or is this
I didn't have
you're
to.
researching
I just
online?
read about it
and,
online.
Okay.
And let's say I set up a woman in Palmerton who was really needy. Well, Otis has the means to help her.
Right. And so that's, I mean, and I guess that's the good part about writing in the modern world is you can travel to any part of the Appalachian Trail and be able to pull pieces out of it and build characters around it. So what went into picking the location or what his journey was going to be? Was it part of your experiences? Have you been on the Appalachian Trail, or was it something more you just really were curious about?
I was curious about the trail
Okay.
because of the people. And I looked at a map, and actually Ellen drew a map,
Oh,
and I'll show it to you. Here it is.
always nice to have visuals in your book. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Here it is.
Oh, that's great.
This is the map of the Appalachian Trail. She didn't go as far up as Mount Katahdin,
Okay.
but she did come down to Great Barrington, Massachusetts, then Palmerton, and in between there were the Rangeley Lakes up in Maine, and then he came down to Damascus, Virginia.
Okay, so it
and
was a
then
big part of
to-
the story then.
Yeah, then to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Asheville, North Carolina, and Springer Mountain, where it ends.
Okay.
Yeah.
And since this story, have you gone to any of those places? Are
Not
you
yet.
interested in going? Or?
I think I would be. I think it would be, because consider that a bucket list.
Yeah, that's really
Item.
interesting, especially having written about it. Maybe bring a copy of your book for each hot spot that
Well,
makes it into your
marketing the
story.
book, what I would probably do is contact a Ford dealership, because I don't want to tell you everything
Right,
about
no
the
spoilers.
book, but Otis buys a Ford F-150,
Okay.
and that's what he uses to travel the trail.
Ah,
Yeah.
not walking. That's my preferred method. Would be the Ford.
No, he's got transportation.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and he meets all kinds of lovely people.
Yeah, and so what a gift to be able to bring this story during such a monotonous time to people that are stuck at home, that they get to, in essence, travel the Appalachian Trail with Otis
Right.
through your serialization.
Mm-hmm.
So each week that goes by, you said some Mondays it wasn't printed. What would happen if they didn't get it on a Monday? Would it go on a Tuesday, or did you skip a week?
Have to skip a week.
Okay, wow. Well, then that really,
Yeah, and that's why they were calling, where can we
Yes.
buy the book?
and I know I've told you before, but my book club, many of whom are in North Reading, also were following it in the North Reading transcript, because I believe it may have gone into more than just the Daily Item. Did it go to all the different papers, or that the Daily Item is whatever friends with or in charge of, or was it just sort of maybe two?
What happened was that Bob Burgess got so many calls about this story that the other editors in the newsroom wanted to know what the story was all about.
Right.
And why was Bob getting so many calls about this? There's Maureen Doherty in charge of North Reading, Dan Tomasello in charge of Linfield, and Bob Burgess in charge of Melrose and Wakefield.
Okay.
So the story got published in all 4 papers.
Wow.
And
That's
they were calling
awesome.
and where can we buy the book?
Right.
Well, you can't.
And
Not yet.
Also, what a gift for the newspaper, because, newspapers would love to know that they're flourishing, but it's definitely a difficult business right now with the modern age of digital and everything. So that, has this idea ever come back up again, or for doing, because yours is the only one that I know of that has ever been serialized. You think they'd ever consider that again?
I would.
Or is it too
but
busy now?
I would definitely consider it again because I've got another novel sitting in my laptop.
Okay.
But I would not approach Bob Burgess about serializing another story unless there was something like the pandemic and the people needed to have something to look forward to.
Right. Because there's just too many things going on now for
Yeah.
space. So now you have all these people calling, they want the book. You're like, well, it's just on my computer. Then you have this lovely person that you work with that's willing to help you go through that process. And I know you have another book that you wrote before this. What was the difference, or was there much of a difference between going through from the idea to the published book for your first one? Was there any difference the second time around? Was it easier or just totally different?
Well, I think you're talking about this book.
Former
This one.
things. Yes.
This one is called Former Things. And this one also wrote itself. I came up with a character. I gave her a problem. And I had to help her solve it. So, yes, it was different. But I would have to say the process wasn't different.
Okay.
It was just that once I established this woman, her name is Emily Preston.
Mm-hmm.
Once I established her as the lead character, the story took on a life of its own.
Okay. And was this the same process of having an idea and sort of letting it percolate and then just coming up with that first sentence to kind of take off from?
I was full-time reporter on the staff of the Wakefield Daily Item at the time, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to write.
Okay.
But when I was home, after work, let's say, I would go right to my laptop and start writing. And I would do that every day after work. And that's how the story got written.
Okay.
But this
And-
one was not serialized.
Okay, so that one just came out as
Mhm.
one full-size baby when
Yeah.
it was born.
This one was published by Eloquent Books.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure if it's in print anymore. I
Ah,
think it is, but it's not as easy to get as that one.
right.
This one is at the Beebe Library.
Okay.
I think at least one copy, if not two.
Alright.
This one is also at the
baby.
Beebe Library.
Okay.
So anybody watching this podcast will know that they can go to the library and get this book.
Right. Or if you really want to give yourself a project, you can go to the library and take out each weekly episode in the
Exactly.
serialization.
I'm sure they have it on microfiche.
Yes, actually,
Yeah.
I think they did just start to convert a lot of the
I think so.
newspapers. So,
Yeah.
so I could go on asking you so many questions, but we are going to wrap this up. But we didn't even touch on your newspaper writing experience, but we'll have to save that for another day. But from all your experience, usually we like to ask, what would be some advice you'd give to people who are trying to get started writing or in the middle of their writing and need to keep going? Any advice that you have from your journey?
I do have advice. When you hit a wall in your writing, break that wall down.
Okay.
Don't let it get in your way. If you come to a point where, well, I don't know what to do next about this character, let it sit. Let it sit. Let it simmer a little bit and then break down that wall.
All right. Thank you so much, Gail.
You are so welcome, Colleen. This has been a joy.
Oh, good. Well, you're a joy to talk to, so thank you for coming in.
You're very welcome.
And if anybody else wants to join us and you have something that you've published and would like to share your journey with us, please get in touch with theroomtowrite.org.